Welcome back to the Malt Miller YouTube channel, Homebrewers, and we are back with another Brew With Us. And this time, I know we say we're excited every time we do one of these, but this is massive. We are at Verdant.
Nice to be in orbit.
Verdant have been generous enough to give us the recipe for Sundialer.
What an awesome recipe. I mean, it's one of their newest pails, but it's packed full of mosaic, motoreka, strata, beautiful smashable beer.
Can't wait to actually find out what goes in to creating a Verdant beer as well, right? Because it's not just about the ingredients. There's bound to be a ton of secret sauce in this. And to help us with that, we've lined up to spend some time with James Heffron, who is co-founder, head brewer here. The guy knows everything there is to know about hops. I can't wait to spend some time with him. But then after we've spent some time with James, what are we doing, Martin?
We're going to catch up with Sam, who's their operations manager, and he's going to show us around the brew house and talk through their process.
That's going to be absolutely awesome. We can take away the magic.
Yeah, I think it's high time. We got into the tap room, spent some time with James, and then head into the brewery.
James, we almost drunk through the entire bar last night, sharing some absolutely amazing beers. One of the things that you said that really stood out was this amazing tap room and this amazing brewery. You knew this was going to happen right from the start. This has been more than 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
And actually, what is actually Verdant? What gives it Verdant?
Wow, okay, what is Verdant? That's a really tricky question. We've been trying to work on that within the company over the last few months as well, because I think deep down in its heart, Verdant is a feeling, it's an instinct.
Yeah.
And to try and put that into words or a strategy or a set of brand values or something is very, very, very difficult. So when we were first starting Verdant, like last night I was saying, what we've got here was not a surprise. This is exactly how, well, I can't speak for everyone, but in my mind, this was always going to happen. We were always going to end up with a place this nice and shiny, producing great beers and inviting the world in. This just was, how long was it going to take to get there? Yeah, Verdant, what is it? It's a bundle of fun. It's loads of energy. It's a rabid dog that's got off its lead and it's running over the hill and we're chasing after it. It's all the above, it's a bunch of great people. It's much more about people now, as we've grown and grown and grown. It's the human beings that make Verdant what it is now. But we're restless. We're always restless. We're never happy. The beer's never hoppy enough. It's just, we're perfectionists. We just want to constantly strive to blow people's minds in terms of beer, but also engage creatively, left field projects, engage with the community, artists, DJs, the whole shebang, students. We're right next to university here.
Yeah.
Can you put that in a sentence, please? It would really help.
Actually, one of the things that I really pick up on is actually it's a feeling.
Yeah.
Because when we're here in the tap room, it doesn't feel like doesn't really feel like a brewery tap room. It's more of a home type feel about it.
Yeah.
And it's a really comfortable space.
Yes.
And actually that shines right through into the brewery as well. What I'd actually quite like to dial into is the actual very beginning, so the homebrew start, because that really chimes with us, obviously.
Yeah. I wasn't a homebrewer for that long, from memory.
Yeah.
It was, I guess, around 2011 or 12 where I really got bitten by the bug, and it was after a second visit to New Zealand, actually, and drinking lots of craft beers out there and driving past hop fields, and just all of that was just too much to deal with. Drinking Nelson Sauvin, NZ Pilsners or IPAs, and then driving past what was probably Nelson Sauvin growing in the same day was pretty mind-blowing. And then when I got home, it was just pretty much buying loads of hops and filling the freezer with hops overnight, basically. Simple kit, bucket, fermenter. Originally I started with not all grain brewing at all. It was dry malt extract.
Yeah.
And I think I started even with a 10 litre stock pot, and I used to liquor it back. But straight off the bat, it was all about the hops. I can remember the first recipe. It was Nelson Citra Pale Ale. And I took a base recipe from the internet. I can't remember exactly where it was from, but like a nice hoppy pale ale. But straight away I took the recipe and I just ripped it to shreds and put way more hops in the whirlpool. I think even then I was reducing the temperature of the whirlpool down to like 80 degrees. And then just filling this pot. There were more hops than liquid, in that beer. And then there was no dry hop in the original recipe. I added a dry hop to it. And bottle conditions, no sort of forced carving, none of that, nothing fancy. And then waiting patiently for like 3 weeks once it's in bottle. And it was bloody brilliant.
Awesome.
There was a banging beer, and it was just instantly better than what was available around in the pubs or bottle shops or anything like that. And all my home brewing was along that vein. I moved to a 20 litre stock pot, still extract. All grain brewing didn't become a thing until we actually made the decision to set up the company and move to a 200 litre kit. Yeah. Then it became all grain. It was so obvious that it was just going to work. I don't know, I can't, it's difficult to say exactly why. It just felt right again.
Yeah.
And it was a no-brainer. I probably only did about 10 home brews or something, and then it was just like, right, well, we need to do this. And so straight away looking to buy kit, how do we do this, etc. I was even like contracting hops when I was home brewing. I was like, this is so obvious this is going to work. In order for us to set up a brewery and succeed, we need Citra, we need Nelson Sauvin, we need Simcoe, all these hops that were in short supply then.
Yeah, and actually that's something that's easily forgotten, which is around about the same time that Malt Miller started as well. There was actually a hop shortage going on.
Oh, massively.
And these beers that were being talked about in the States mainly, as far as I was concerned, being talked about in the States, you couldn't get these hops.
No.
They were difficult to get hold of.
That's why I started signing contracts. I think I might have signed the contract under my own name, before the company was even formed. So it was a hop contract with James Heffron, and whoever it was. I think it was probably Charles Farrams at the time. And then, the moment Verdant was formed, it was straight away I was signing contracts to give us enough hops for what I thought we would be doing in 2 years' time. Yeah. Like on a 200 litre kit. It's ballsy.
Yeah.
It was proper ballsy.
You were kind of like at the forefront of the whole New England, the hazy pales.
Yes.
Where did you get your inspiration from that? And because there was no knowledge being shared at that time.
No, it was. I've got very clear memories of this. So when I first started doing the home brewing, the people I was looking up to would be Colonel, Magic in the UK, Magic Rock. The Cloudwater were just beginning around 2013, 14 or something, I think. But I was looking stateside a lot. And I was beginning to take notice of Hill Farmstead. That would have been, I think they started in 2011, maybe somewhere around there. So I was really interested in what was going on there. Alchemist was very big on the list as well. And then I started to clock this brewery called Treehouse, who were brewing on a 50 litre kit or something, in a treehouse. And it was a combination of Hill Farmstead, Alchemist and Treehouse. And I remember Treehouse this was before Instagram and all that sort of stuff. It was blogs, they had blogs. And one day Treehouse posted a picture of Julius, I think, one of the earlier batches of Julius, and it was clear, it looked like a West Coast. And then a few weeks later they were like, we've done another batch now and it looked like orange juice. I was like, what's going on here then? And then that dialing into that, and Alchemist as well, which were producing hazy beers, and Hill Farmstead as well. It was just, I could just see that there was something happening here, and it was the excitement in the community over in the States I wanted to know what that felt like. I wanted to drink those beers, but I couldn't get them. So the only way to do it was to figure out how to fucking make them.
They were so different.
Yeah.
They were so different. We were still putting crystal malt in West Coast IPAs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you see, like the whole movement of cloudy East Coast beers, something that was completely new, and
there were so many rabbit holes that were enjoyable to dive down. You know, there was the hop one, but then with the New England style, it was a lot about yeast, the yeast choice and what that's bringing. You know, it wasn't just fermenting and getting out of the way, it was marrying itself with the hops. So it was Conan yeast and London Ale 3 and all these ones that were popping up out of nowhere. And I really loved that kind of English yeast heritage that was part of this new American IPA, hazy IPA movement. That really chimed with me. And then the water profile, you know, all those elements where the East Coast brewers had really taken the IPA world and shifted it entirely. You know, so you started to have like a stout mouthfeel, and you had yeast esters that were right there in the glass as well, and then just massive hop saturation. So all the clues were there, but there was no chance that I was going to be able to taste these. So we just on a mission to recreate them, or at least do our own version of them. So we just went about doing it. So by the time I think Cloudwater were starting to do their V series, and they were quite West Coast focused, the first ones. We were in a shipping container. I was probably on about batch 10 or 11 of about 13 single hop pale ales, working out what these hops are about. And I was using London Ale 3 yeast, you know, and they were hazy New England style beers. So we were practicing. But when we first started releasing Verdant beers into the world and selling the beers, it was all Chico yeast because we didn't have the ability to harvest the yeast. So we had to use dry yeast, but all the practices around it were kind of New England. So the grist, water profile, they were hazy, but the yeast was a dry, highly attenuating Chico style yeast. So it was this kind of mid-coast or mountain type IPA, or, you know, that thing in the middle, and that's what Lightbulb is. Headband, Bloom, Pulp, they're all in that world, and they're unchanged, you know, people like them for that. But when we finally got conical fermenters and we could start to harvest yeast, then it gave us the opportunity to be like, okay, now we can use the yeast we really want to use, and we can push into the world some pale ales, IPAs and double IPAs that are going to blow people's minds. And so we just started to do it, and they were absolutely banging from day one, you know, because we knew what we were doing. We weren't sending beers into the world that we weren't sure of. They were so good, and it was just the momentum behind the brand was just bonkers.
We fast forward to today and the current range of beers that are on the bar that we were doing well getting through last night. One of those beers is Sundialer, and you very kindly shared the recipe with us so that we can share it with the homebrew community. Can you tell us a little bit about that beer, the recipe, and what goes into it? Sure.
Yeah, Sundialer is an interesting one. I was given the challenge by our head of sales last year, and it was essentially there's Lightbulb, Headband, People, Money, Space, Time, there's the Hellers. Those were sort of the core beers that were always around. But there was a need for one that was coming in at 5%. So there was this desire for a very verdant, classically verdant pale ale. So our yeast, hazy, saturated, but doesn't break the bank. You know, it was one of those challenges where you had to build the recipe based around a price point. It's very, very, very rare that I've ever had to do that. In fact, 99% of the time I have no constraints on how many hops I can put in a beer or, you know, anything like that, because we just focus on blowing people's minds with flavour and aroma.
Back to the feeling,
back to the feeling. But with Sundialer, it was like, look, we need one at 5%. It was all these things it needed to be. And I was just thinking, that's going to be impossible. But it's, you know, up for the challenge. And that, you know, fast forward, I would say it's one of the beers that I'm most proud of. It's got enough of a dry finish that you want to go back. It's got enough of a fluffy mouthfeel that it feels like a Verdant beer. It's got the Verdant yeast character. It's got a lovely hop profile. Yeah, very proud of that beer. In terms of how the techniques and tactics to get that, it was we went with Golden Promise as the base malt. I think it works really well in pale ales. It doesn't darken the beer too much. If you went 100% Golden Promise in an IPA or a double IPA, you'd probably start to get too much of an orange type of look. But on a pale ale, it works really well, and I think it adds to the body and a slight perceived sweetness and a bit more character in there. And then it's got oats, obviously, that bit of flaked wheat and a little bit of dextrin as well. So it's pretty basic malt bill. And then we use, we've actually changed our bittering hop now. We now use Mosaic T90. We just really enjoy Mosaic as a bittering hop. So it's Mosaic first wort hop, and then we've just fallen in love with Motueka, and especially the stuff that we get, 'cause it's mind-blowing. It's also considerably cheaper, so that in my mind I'm like, so I can use more of it then. And so yeah, it's layering up the Motueka additions through the boil, which is quite rare for a New England beer. Normally you just chuck them all in the low temperature whirlpool, or a cool pool as they call it in the States, and then just layered up some IBUs, I think like 15 minutes possibly, and 5 minutes, and then a big old whirlpool with Motueka at 75 to 80 degrees. So you're getting a good level of hop saturation before you've even dry hopped without breaking the bank. That was the concept. And Motueka works beautifully hot side as well, and it punches through. And then dry hop wise, it was, really being clever about the hops we went with. So Mosaic, Motueka again, and then we really like HBC 586, so there's a little bit of that in there, a little bit of strata in there as well.
So you're layering all those hop flavors together.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things you're really good at, and you know, I absolutely adore the fact that how much you use those New Zealand hops in so many different beers.
Yeah, they're just amazing hops. I think, you know, they're my favourite hops. I prefer them to the American hops. I just think they've got a lot more interesting notes. You know, like I like savouriness as long as there's a fruity thing going on as well. If it's just fruit, I'm bored very quickly. If it's just savoury, it's off-putting. But this middle ground where you get it all working together, you can just feel it being a much more interesting drinking experience. And I think that's what our customer base resonate with that. You know, they expect the beer to be a little bit challenging, that there's going to be layers of flavour and aroma that are probably difficult to give adjectives to. You know, they're just there, and it all comes all together, and it's like a verdant beer.
I'm really interested to hear about your take on the quality of ingredients. You can't end up with a quality end product, a quality drinking product, unless you are using the very best. Tell us about the New Zealand selection.
Yeah. With New Zealand, we work with Brent McGlashan of Max Hops, specifically supporting the NZ co-op, NZ Hops, and then Charles Fareham supply chain. Yeah. And that's really great. And like literally Brent and I will be chatting to each other daily on WhatsApp, and he's like doing videos out in the fields, he's showing me things, and he's like, that's your Motueka plot there, James. That's, you know. Awesome. And I stayed with him and his lovely family this year. I was invited out for Harfest, which is the NZ Hops Harvest festival kind of thing, and we bussed around, visited farms, did a panel discussion, all that kind of stuff. But it's just that connection back to the soil and the human beings that are really devoted to it is key. And I love that about Brent and NZ Hops. It's so personal all the way back. It's not quite like that in the States because of the size of it. Yeah. But again, it's, you know, choosing those lots are absolutely key. And then malts as well. We predominantly use Simpsons. I think they are the best, hands down. Their speciality stuff's amazing as well. But their base malts, we use Golden Promise and Extra Pale. They're just stunning malts, very consistent. And then obviously we've got our lovely soft Cornish water. Yeah. We could probably do nothing to our water and the beers would be really good, you know, but we do fiddle with the water quite a lot. And then obviously our yeast, that expressive yeast that's we've managed to slightly mutate at the old site, and is proven to be genetically slightly different to London Ale 3, which it started off as.
Sure.
When I was in New Zealand, the coach took us to NZ Hops, where they're making the pellets, and they were processing R. Nelson.
Oh, awesome.
Which is just insane. They were chatting away, and then the guy was like, James, Verdant, right? Yeah, we're processing a Nelson now. And then we went round, and I'm like putting my hand under the T90 pellets and going, sending a video to Brent, just 20 miles up the road, and his final, like, Brent, smells fucking great, man.
So James, you've talked us through the recipe, the ingredients, and what's important here at Verdant.
Yep.
If we're going to scale that down to a homebrew size, what should we be looking out for? What things should we make sure we do?
Yeah, that's okay. We need to sort of break this down into sections then, I think. So, for starters, there's really not much difference between home brewing and that. It's the same thing, it's just there's more pipes, pumps and valves and things, but you've got to monitor the same points. So pHs, temperatures, gravities, all these sorts of things are crucial. Liquor to grist ratios, just dial in further and further and further into every process and keep lots of records, and then go back and mimic the bits that worked, remove the bits that aren't working, etc. So things that are key to us would be always getting close to a 5.4 pH for mash at room temperature, and using lactic acid to adjust to get there. Calcium chloride, calcium sulfate in the mash as well. We often add a bit of sodium chloride to the kettle, which is, I think, something that we actually brought to the game years and years ago. It was a way of adding more chloride and mouthfeel without bumping the calcium up. So we've got very low sodium levels anyway. So if we nudge it up to 50 ppm sodium, we've got added another 50 chloride without pushing the calcium to a point where it feels like you're drinking toothpaste or something. So pH really important. Gravities, monitoring your runoff, so you're not, the pH doesn't spike above 6 in the final runnings. Make sure that your gravity of final runnings doesn't dip below like 0.05 or 0.06. Stop then, because you're going to start extracting some not very nice things out of the husks, etc. It's not all about like chucking loads of oats into a beer and loads of chloride and hopping it to high heaven and think you're going to have a good beer. It's not that simple. It really isn't. And then when people think that it's an easy style, they're so wide of the mark, it's unbelievable. And then in the kettle as well, it's that pH is very, very important. We're targeting for different beers, we will be looking for like a pre-boil pH, a post-boil pH, and then we're looking for when we're pitching the yeast, we want it at a certain pH, usually around 5 at that point. When we're pitching the yeast slurry will be slightly acidic, and that will drag it down a bit further. So post-yeast pitch, we might be at 4.8, 4.9. And then post-ferment, we're usually down at like 4.1, and then you dry hop and it bumps it back up again. This is Sundialer specifically. With double IPAs, where you'd probably, pH would be about 4.2, then you dry hop it and it goes 4.7, 4.8 isn't, that's often quite high, but you get a lot of body with that final pH as well. Specifically Sundialer, we whirlpool it at, so we've got those kettle editions with Motueka to just add a bit of bite, bit of bitterness to make you want to keep coming back. And then we transfer it to the whirlpool via a shell and tube heat exchange. So what they actually do is they recirc back into the kettle through a shell and tube, and that reduces the kettle contents down to like 90 degrees, and then they fire it into the whirlpool and shave off the final 10 to 12 degrees in one go.
Right.
So we very quickly get our full kettle contents into the whirlpool with all the lovely Motueka in there at a lower temperature, somewhere around 77 degrees, something like that. Then we let it sit for 30 minutes. And then we transfer to FV, and we transfer quickly. We get it into FV probably 60 hectolitres an hour, so it's a 40 hectolitre batch. So how long's that?
Under an hour. So
Yeah,
you're
40 minutes, something like that.
Transfer it in 40 minutes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
actually really important.
And O2.
Because that's the...
Sterile oxygen. So we'll, our yeast is a lazy English yeast. It's great at fermenting, but if you make its life difficult in any way, it will stick its middle fingers up and go to sleep on you, and you can't wake it up again. Pitch it like 18 or 19, and then let it rise up towards the middle of fermentation, like 20, 21. Don't be afraid to go a bit higher if you want. You can pull a few more esters out. It's all of that kind of stuff. We're usually at final gravity at day 4 with Sundialer, and then usually we're constantly fiddling. So there's no like, we always dry hop at this temperature, we always do this, because we're always fiddling around. Generally speaking, with Sundialer, we hit final gravity, we pass forced diacetyl test, and then we do what we call a soft crash, and that's bringing the temperature down to about 13 degrees, and that encourages the yeast to flocculate into the cone, which it's doing anyway. And then we'll harvest or dump the yeast. From a pale ale, we'll be harvesting to pitch again. And then once we've got the yeast out of the cone and it's settled at 13 degrees, then all the dry hops go in one go.
Right, this is really interesting. So you are making sure that the beer is basically clear of yeast before you're dry hopping. In that beer specifically, and most of our beers, that's how we would approach it. Soft crash, remove the yeast from the cone to either use again or to dump. Once that's been removed, the cellar team are also dumping the cone each day in all the fermenters, to get rid of the trub or anything else, dead yeast cells, etc. So they're very vigilant on that. That's an important thing to do. And then, once the yeast's out, we throw the hops in. Literally, we don't have a hop cannon, we don't do anything fancy. We've tried all that sort of stuff. We've trialed these things and we hate them. We open the manway on the top and we throw the hops in. We close the manway and we go home. And then our usual method is to bubble rouse with CO2, which quite aggressively, like really big bubbles.
And hard pressure. So it's really breaking up that cake and mixing it around. The cellar team will do probably 3 10-second bursts of that, and then on day 2, so you throw them in 24 hours later, do the first rouse, and then wait, and then they'll check the beer the following day and see how it's smelling and everything, and if it needs another rouse, they'll go for it. Usually contact time's about 3 days, and then they'll crash it to 0. Leave all the hops in there. Usually we don't try and get them out, we leave them in there, and then we transfer via the centrifuge to the bright tank. We transfer a portion without centrifuging it to bright tank, and then we transfer the second half via the centrifuge. And we're using the racking arm and really digging into the hotbed and dragging through hops, and the centrifuge spinning them out, and we're getting lots more flavour like that. So it's an interesting piece of kit.
So you're using the centrifuge to increase the hop contact with the beer rather than using the centrifuge to clear the beer as such? Yeah,
we don't really, yield improvements is a byproduct of the centrifuge. For us, it was never top of the list. It was more, it's really like, if you imagine you've got a bucket fermenter and you've got these hops on the top, you've probably got 20 centimetres or 25 centimetres for these hops to drop. Those fermenters are 6.5 metres high, so that's a long way for these very fine particles to drop all the way down. It takes a long time. So all the centrifuge is doing is increasing the forces of gravity by many thousands of times. So it just helps to speed that process up as you're moving it into the bright tank. What else is there to say about Sundialer? Tastes bloody great.
James, thanks very much for talking through Sundialer. We are huge fans of all the beer here, as we showed last night. As a homebrewer, there's also other homebrewers out there who are huge fans of what you do. And they're always trying to replicate it. What would you say are the kind of main rules or guides that you use when you're creating a new Verdant beer that we should take away if we wanted to create our own version of it?
Good question. I would say before anything technical, one of the things that's absolutely key is to be excited about the idea. So, I'm still very, very excited opening a bag of hops and sniffing it. Like, that's just such an exciting feeling. And for me, it's all about trying to translate that excitement into the finished product. So I think you've got to have that in the forefront of your mind if you're making a hoppy beer. You've got to be truly excited about what you're trying to do. Then I never understand like if homebrewers haven't got a pH pen. If you haven't, they're like £100, and then just look after them, calibrate them every time you want to. On a brew day, calibrate them at the start. It's just very, very key to be taking pH readings, and it's very easy to do. Just make sure you get the sample down to 20 degrees, and then do that. I'll get a good temperature probe. You can't take enough measurements, and take notes. Take a lot of notes as you're going along, not just readings, but actually write some stuff down. Like, this didn't go too well, I wonder what's going on here. Just write it down, Listen to some good music on a brew day. I'd say that's important. Geek out, always geek out. Watch other videos, look for inspiration elsewhere, try other people's beers. I'm guilty of not trying enough beers from other places, I'll be honest, but that's important. What else would I say is key? A lot of brewing is cleaning. Make sure your kit's clean, look after it, housekeeping. If your kit's not clean, then how do you expect to make good beer? You got keep your hoses really nice and clean. Fermenters, obviously, anything that's cold side needs to be not sterile, because that's an almost impossibility, but sanitized.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to. You want your baby to happily eat their dinner off whatever you're putting that beer in, that wort in to ferment. And look after all the kit. You don't think you need to invest hundreds or thousands of pounds in stuff. You make very, very good hoppy beer with a bucket, stock pot, malt extract, nice hops, and bottle condition. You can make lovely hoppy beer like that. You don't have to have all the singing and dancing stuff. So I would say, if you're just getting started, start with a very simple setup. Learn to be patient, because if you're bottle conditioning, you need to wait 2 or 3 weeks. But you learn so much, because I think with bottle conditioning and stuff, you understand what the yeast is doing. It's sorting the beer out once it's in the bottle. It's going to go through diacetyl creation, then reabsorption in the bottle. And carbonating naturally. All those sorts of things I found fascinating in the early days.
Just get the basics right first.
Yeah. Don't jump too far ahead.
Yeah.
Taste the grains. Get excited. Enjoy the sensory aspect of brewing. Brew day. Stinking your house out. Everything smells like Horlicks. And just geek out. Just don't lose the excitement of it.
Actually, I find it really interesting. I'm really going to pick up on the fact that your cellar team, your cold side team, it's a sensory process to tell when that beer is ready, rather than any measurement at that part. Their measurement is they're sensing they're smelling the beer, which is actually really interesting. It's not that beer is done on that day. It's because it's been in the tank for 2 days. It's the fact that it's actually smelt, and that's the point. It's ready.
It's very. So we've been historically a very intuitive brewery, not a particularly scientific brewery. We've always just trusted our instinct and our senses and moved forward like that. As we've grown, we've needed to, and it's been very beneficial to bring on some people with some excellent experience, science-based knowledge. So it's this balancing act of not losing the intuitive nature of Verdant, because that's where I think all the truly exciting flavours come from. But it's the consistency of the scientific background of certain people now in Verdant that really dial into just ensuring that this product or these products are going to be great. But I think we're good. Our consistency is really up there, and I love those comments where people are like, "It's Verdant, of course it's good. Their beers are always good." Well, those are the best comments, because that's better than a 5 out of 5. Because what they're saying, they're complimenting every layer of the company and production, And that's just like a massive tick and a pat on the back for everyone. So those are the comments I love, yeah.
James, thank you very much for your time, sharing such information and kind of giving us a behind the scenes, and for having an awesome night with us last night.
Yep.
And now you've also arranged for us to go and see Sam in the brewery, who's going to give us a tour around and show us what actually really goes on.
Yeah, make sure you quiz him loads.
Yeah, we
He's
will.
great. He's good on camera as well. No, it's been my pleasure. Anytime, love chatting about beer. You know.
Thank you.
And Malt Miller is an amazing company, obviously.
Cheers, thanks.
Yeah, it means a lot. Thank you.
Make sure to tune in next week when we get a look behind the scenes with Sam Taylor, Operations Manager here at Verdant Brewing Co, where we're going to learn even more about what it takes to brew some of the most forward-thinking craft beer in the world.